Ladies. And you are listening to What's the Hazard? It is Friday, May 19th. So I refer to my notes.
It's happy hour.
19th. It is happy hour. 3 o'clock. High noon, 3 o'clock. We are recording. Aaron Cerrone, Katrina Bishop, back by popular demand. I'll have you know that this was the most listened to episode of all time.
Because they're her, not us. Clearly not us.
Clearly not us. Exactly. No, that one, when we spoke the first time, we talked a lot about mindset and things like that, maybe. And that was really popular. It was the most listened to episode I think we've done, if not one of the most. So I wanted to get the band back together and kind of revisit some of these topics. So thank you for driving up from Lincoln. And
she's usually doing charts and paperwork now anyway. So
I appreciate that. So, and you're going to have
a nice break
tomorrow.
Yeah, half the day documentation.
Yeah, that's
the
tough.
The worst part of most jobs is documentation.
I absolutely hate the documentation part of my job.
You probably had a lot of that, Nosha. A lot of paperwork.
Yeah,
almost to the point where you probably didn't want to find anything. I don't want to look at that because that's going to be a lot of paperwork.
You know, that's interesting you say that because I feel like being 10 years removed from the job, I can be honest about it.
A little bit.
But yeah, man, we would stop at a certain point because we knew everything else that we found was just more paperwork. And we were essentially evaluated. I mean, OSHA claims to have goals rather than quotas. I always thought that an inflexible goal was a quota, but I guess, it's just semantics to some degree, but you would stop because you knew that you were allowed a certain amount of time per inspection on average. And
you're just piling on at that point anyway.
Piling on. Yeah. And I don't know if it's making any difference for the company. So usually we just, okay, I've got enough, and it depended on the time of the month too. Cause it was like the first of the month, then I would really pile on and then I could coast the rest of the month.
There you go.
Cause we didn't have quotas necessarily, but
that's fair.
That makes me think of something it was in a group I was leading yesterday, and I challenged the ladies to write down a commitment and instead of a goal.
A hard or a soft commitment?
Well, I'll get to that, but then I had another staff member ask me why I had not really a problem, but why I didn't like the word goal. And I think you said something that played to that perfectly. Why I don't prefer the word goal over commitment, because goals are usually something somebody else or an organization wants for you, not necessarily what the person themselves. I mean, we all know what we should be doing or the quotas we need to meet, but a commitment that will get you towards the long-term goal or the desired outcome, I always felt was more motivating for clients.
I think you hit a point too. A goal is a thing. A commitment is something I'm doing.
100%.
Yeah.
We can set goals.
Yeah. Action.
These
It's the
grandiose
action.
goals and then do nothing to get there. But if I'm committing to something, I'm putting some skin in the game, so to speak.
Yeah.
And doing that.
And I think it is just simply wordplay to some degree, but it really affects you.
Yeah.
The words have people used to ask me all the time, well, what are your 5-year goals, Doug? And I said, well, it depends on if you ask me in the morning or the afternoon.
Yeah.
Because in the morning, I'm thinking about what I'm having for lunch. And in the afternoon, I'm thinking about what I'm having for dinner. And that's as far out as I think.
Right.
But people were always,
That's true.
You need to have a 5-year plan. I'm like, I don't know who I'm going to be tomorrow. How can I set up goals if I have no idea who I'm going to be?
And I think there's something to be said for living in the moment. Like if you're always looking out 3 and 5 years, you're missing what's happening right now. And you're not living the moment. You're not enjoying what you're doing. You're not taking advantage of things that are happening in the moment. But at the same time, if you're always in the moment, and then 5 years later, you're broke. You're like, you weren't thinking that far ahead. You got no retirement.
Yes.
I see both sides of the coin, right? It's you don't want to live in the past. You don't want to live in the future too much. You miss the moment, but at the same time, you can't ignore the past, and you can't discount what might happen in the future either. So
Well, without revealing too much, but we do have a lot of new listeners to the program, which we're very grateful for. Would you tell a little bit about yourself, just what you do without getting into, I know obviously you deal in great confidentiality, but
absolutely
the things that you do?
Yeah. So I'm a licensed drug and alcohol counselor at a women's rehab center in Lincoln. So Monday through Friday, I go there and I do the short-term residential counseling there for their program, which is an amazing program.
I'll bet.
And then I have a hypnotherapy office still here in Omaha.
Awesome.
Which I absolutely love. I don't see ever giving that up because it's a different type of client that I get to work with.
What type of client would come to you for hypnotherapy?
So I see a lot in the areas of anxiety and panic attacks and trauma, but I also have like professional performance clients. So I have, business clients, I have athletes, just individuals that are looking to like take themselves to the next level. And so some skills, strategies, and some mindset, kind of like life coaching that they come to me for. And then the anxiety panic attack kind of fits into like the phobias, traumas, where they have obstacles that have presented in their life that are starting to deteriorate their life or take things away from their life that were important to them. So it's becoming something that isn't just really manageable on its own anymore. So I'm usually the last resort, though. Like they've tried possibly medications, talk therapy, and they just don't know what else to do. So, and I love working with all the different like types of clients. In the residential setting, it's a 6 to 8 week program. So most of the clients are coming in from drug courts or jail. And so a lot of that is stabilization and just getting started on their recovery journeys, because those are usually a much longer types of recoveries. For some, it'll be years to really address the addiction and the trauma that usually co-occurs with addiction.
Wow.
Yeah.
So by Friday afternoon, you're pretty tired.
Yeah.
Are you able to hypnotherapize on the weekends? You still have something left?
I'm learning, I can talk a lot about self-care and a lot about like ways to de-stress, but to say that I'm a master at it is probably lying.
You're still learning.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And meditation, mindset, I think didn't have that background or that piece of it, I think the effects of the job would probably take its toll a lot more. Yeah. Yeah. So that is something that I have to be pretty diligent about. I think anyone that works in a helping field, especially like first responders, counselors in this field of trauma and addiction, definitely have to have some good routines and some good self-care.
Self-care.
Yep. Yeah.
And so everybody knows Erin, but for those of you that don't, for the new listeners that don't, you are also in self-care. That's your world too, in large part.
Self-care, some self-destruction as well.
A little bit on that. But I mean, truly. So fitness, health, nutrition, those kind of things.
Yep. A little bit of everything.
A little bit of everything. So I had some questions. Let's skip the questions. I have some personal interests. So I've been reading a lot lately about, and I don't know if you read this on the same side of the research, you probably do, but the effects of, like, you sent out a post today on the LinkedIn that I noticed that was referring to the uses of creatine monohydrate specifically, but creatine as a supplement.
That was one I liked. A friend of mine
kind of posted that on, and the reason being, so I have always taken creatine. In the younger days, it was for more of a physical activity purpose, but now I do it because I believe that there's evidence to suggest it's good for brain health. Sure. It's kind of like good for anxiety and depression issues, even because it's kind of an energy molecule. Are you guys on this team? Are we on the same team here? Or?
Well, I naturally read a lot about it. Just the fact that I'm in the middle of a didactic program and I'm forced to, I say forced to, that's a bad way to say it, but I'm regularly in the research and in the databases. And like you, I was always interested in a lot of those things. And the funny part is, growing up an athlete and before the science caught up with the athletics, there's a lot of bro science, right?
Oh yeah.
Stuff we learned in a weight room just by watching people And I have to laugh. People, make fun of bodybuilders as, the stereotype steroided big dumb idiots. But bodybuilders figured out a lot of stuff. They didn't understand it scientifically, but they figured out a lot of things of what to eat, how to work out, when to eat, and when to cycle different things. And now the science is starting to support a lot of it. One of them being creatine, and not to get nerd out too much of it, creatine is very involved in the ATP regeneration cycle, and creatine monophosphate is what we all generally take. But the creatine phosphate, it provides the extra phosphate molecules to create more ATP for the body's energy source.
Just really phosphorylate that ADP right back.
Yep, and ATP is the energy that we use. Everything we eat eventually turns into ATP at some point. So it makes sense that beyond physically working out in bigger muscles, that the necessity of ATP and the healthy metabolism and the regeneration of ATP in the body does have a major play in longevity and brain health and body health and cell health and whatnot.
Which certainly has to play into anxiety and depression related issues. I don't know if you deal with that, but nutrition, what am I trying, like insulin resistance as contributors to mental health challenges.
Yeah,
Are you?
Sure. I mean, Aaron and I have had these discussions before too. There's really amazing medical studies that have come out to support that. Well, most of the serotonin that we make is in our gut.
Mm-hmm.
And if you think about most of the American diets, they don't really support like healthy serotonin production in the gut. Same thing with exercise. It's one of the top things to improve anxiety is like 30 minutes of exercise a day. The research shows that it does better than most anxiety drugs, to be truthful. So diet and exercise really play a very important part in a person's mental health, more than most people would realize.
And that microbiome, that gut health, such an important part.
Yep. And the rebuilding of new neural pathways is really important. And a lot of those supplements that you mentioned, that they really support healthy brain function. The research shows that it's reducing like Alzheimer's. There's some really amazing studies coming out about nutrition. And the amazing thing about the brain is, you can build new neural pathways. All habits are formed in the brain as a neural pathway. And so until it's, kind of modified and a new one can build, and the best way to build that is through healthy nutrition, through exercise, through, there's a lot of different methods, and in some cases, medications are required to regulate a person. But definitely anxiety is one of those that definitely has more benefits to diet and exercise than medications.
I'm always amazed. I'm always amazed how, and I think this is Western medicine thought that we generally resort to the medication quickly because you can put something in somebody's hand and this will make you feel better. And when diet, nutrition, and health and exercise really should be the first approach. And I've been doing a lot of reading on fasting and how fasting promotes healthy levels of epinephrine, norepinephrine, cortisol, helps regulate all the major hormones in our body, which in turn regulates brain health and healthy brain function and stabilizes emotions, stabilizes anxiety and all these things. And I don't know if I've ever heard of a doctor when treating somebody with anxiety or depression, just say, hey, don't eat for 2 days.
Yeah, do a 24-hour fast or something.
See how you feel. But amazingly, it's that after periods of fasting, people always say, wow, I think more clearly, my anxiety's gone. Because what happens is your hormone levels stabilize, your cortisol levels stabilize, epinephrine, norepinephrine, dopamine, they all start to stabilize. And it's like, oh, wow, everything's starting to function like it's supposed to.
Right.
Now it's not a cure-all like that overnight, but what it does is it's just a quick way to say, hey, you know what? This is the impact that your diet and nutrition have on you and how you're feeling. And just a basic 24-hour fast, you will see a difference quickly. But you'll never hear a doctor say that, hey, just don't eat for 24 hours and let's go and come back and we'll talk. And you're going to go, and a lot of people will go, hey, you know what? I actually feel better. It's like, okay, so what does that tell you?
Most people can make it 24 hours.
That's true. That's true.
That's the hard part.
Katrina and I had a hot debate one night about fasting.
We've almost got thrown out of several coffee shops. Him and I.
And she was adamant that people couldn't do it. And
it's very difficult. To convince yourself that you can do it. A
small percentage, but the overall majority.
Because we're so conditioned to
100%
to eat meals on a regular time frame.
And truth be told, a lot of times the feelings that you're experiencing are truly withdrawal feelings. That when you're not eating, we know things like sugar have the same effect on the brain as cocaine. Right. So it just, we hear about addicts going through withdrawal, but we go through food withdrawal as well. So that's a lot of times why people can't make it through. Even 24 hours is actually considered an extended fast. I don't consider it extended, but it is, right? And most people just can't. When people say it's not sustainable, and this is where our argument actually started to happen was
I'm gonna get thrown
hang
out
on. Hang on.
I always said it is sustainable, right? It is sustainable. And we were saying the same thing, but coming at it from different angles. It's sustainable, but my thing is people just don't have the discipline to be able to do it. That the body, most of us have enough energy stored on our body, which is what we know is fat, that we could not eat for a month and be okay. I mean, most of America could literally not eat for a year.
Just drink water.
Swear to God, we
Yeah.
could not eat for a year. We have enough stored vitamins for about.
Do I need to put a disclaimer in here?
We have enough stored vitamins in our body for about 30 days. Check this out.
Yes.
Think about this.
Okay.
We have enough stored vitamins. So you could live off of water for 30 days. And after 30 days, you would need a vitamin supplement, but the average American could probably not eat for at least 6 months and still survive without a problem, which is mind blowing when you think about it. Now,
It is.
Now you'd just be
to
burning
bring this-
ketones, right? You'd just be converting ketones. And,
well, you convert fat to ketones anyway. But I guess think about this. It's like if we know that, what's that effect on our mental health? Right? Like if our body is in that state that we could not eat for 6 months and be okay,
Yeah.
what does that say about our state of mental health? And then how quickly do we think we can just recover and get back to a healthy state of mind and whatnot? It just takes time, is my point. It takes time because Rome wasn't built in a day, but you can't.
No, you can't.
Yeah.
do you advocate for things like that in your therapies or your treatments?
Absolutely. But I also know for most people, Aaron would be a good example of like logical mind thinking. Like,
And a person who is obviously very disciplined.
very disciplined, and also like stating a lot of facts that are absolutely true about what the body can do, what it can withstand. And then you might be an example of wise mind, the middle path, and I'll be the emotional mind. And the emotional mind, we all have two different dialects in our brain. One is very, very logical. We all know, most people, what we should be doing different, what we should be eating better, how we should be exercising, sleeping, all of the things. And the emotional side is the one that's like, oh, but I'll start Monday, or I feel really deprived, or I want to reward myself for making it 2 days to the gym, or, I want to reward myself for having a bad day. It's those emotional attachments. And generally in the moment of like when things get uncomfortable, so I don't know, because I've never fasted 24 hours. He's been like sending texts every other week to be like, who wants to fast with me? And I'm just like,
I've done the 24 hours. I've never done a 72 hour.
I've done a
yeah,
72.
you've done the 72.
I've done 24 hours.
And you definitely saw a difference. But I'd say most people, a majority, will always revert back to the old way of doing things, whether that's eating, whatever it is. In the moment things start to feel uncomfortable, your brain is wired to present to you, hey, this will make you feel better, or this is how we've always, eaten or behaved. The study says that like 95% of our habits are hardwired into our body, so into muscle tissue, into neural pathways.
Epigenetic.
Yeah. So subconsciously, we are disciplined to whatever the behavior is, good or bad, like 95% of our thinking and doing. So only 5% is our conscious thoughts that know what we need to
Are we
change.
talking about free will here?
Yeah.
Or are we
So
talking about
in our thinking, like 5% knows like, here's what we should be doing differently. Here's what, how I should eat for health. This is what we want to do. But when 95% of it's programmed to whatever the habit or discipline is, it's really hard to change if a person doesn't like have the discipline like Aaron would have, through his careers, through his studies, through just how he structured his life,
which has
around
become a
health.
habit for him.
Yeah,
Obviously,
absolutely.
that has been ingrained in his DNA.
But for most clients, if they come to me and let's say we're working on weight loss or something, most diets fail if they're based off of deprivation because of just how the human brain works. So generally those small commitments to either increasing exercise or that they can successfully do day by day will get them to the goal. But if I were just to say like, hey, we're going to fast for 3 days and we're going to reset the system, people would be like,
freaked out.
yeah, they would just be like, okay, well,
I'm a relatively
sounds
disciplined
good,
person, but I
but-
know if I'm planning to start my diet on Monday, I'm going to kill some apple fritters this weekend before, so if
Yeah,
I
I'll
know
do
I'm
that
going into deprivation,
yeah.
I am going to hit it hard before I start that.
Or
But
like with keto, like, you make one mistake and then it's like, okay, well, I've just already blown it. So I'm out of ketosis. So I'm just going to eat everything in sight and start all over come Monday.
I'm guilty of that as well.
Yeah,
but
I think
this
most
is
of us
just
are.
kind of to roll this into an occupational setting, to a workplace setting. I think that the mental and psychological demands on employees seem to be so great, and they seem to be even higher post-COVID, and even physical demands of it. But we don't ever think about these kind of things in the workplace, other than very, very exclusive workplaces. But I'm going to give an example. My wife works in a healthcare setting. I'm not going to name the facility, but she works at a hospital in town.
It's
here.
one of two.
Yeah, one of the two hospitals in town here. You can guess. But every afternoon, they go around and take cake orders, and they get cake for the employees and for the patients.
Sure.
And that's a very comforting thing, right? I get to have a little cake. I'm in the hospital. I'm probably not all that thrilled, so I'm having a little cake. The employees are eating cake. I mean, why aren't we going around and giving them soluble fiber or something?
Well, I think there's two things. It's twofold going on. I think in the last probably 10 years, you're seeing more speak within companies about mental health.
We have.
days.
There's been some
Putting the person before the dollar, things like that. And now how that's carried out isn't always the best, right? So sometimes that's misconstrued as to let them all have cake every day, right?
right, literally.
But the angle is, well, if people are happy and they feel like someone cares about them and they're not just a number, and who doesn't love cake, then they love the work environment more. That's a better culture, and everybody wants to be there and they're more productive. Nobody wants fiber.
They don't want chicory or Brussels sprouts for their treat.
While the intent is good, the implementation isn't always the best. But again, we're dealing with people who, if they're going to choose an apple or a cake, what are they going to choose? Majority of people are already conditioned, right?
That choice for them.
Cake. So I understand why companies would do that. I understand, the whole idea of culture being very important and making employees feel like they're important, and I all very valid and very necessary. Could companies focus more on physical and mental health in different ways? I believe so. But let's be honest, most of the companies don't have the expertise or the capacity to do that at the same time. And while they want to invest in it, they don't invest too much into it to the point where, do they want a registered dietitian on staff and an exercise therapist on staff helping people, right? That would be the ultimate. But okay, we're going to go to a certain point. Cake is as far as we're going to go, right?
But they could hire people like you to come in and consult with them.
They could.
Those things.
But at the end of the day, then you start to get into, well, to what point is it going to be just noise for people? How far is someone really going to go with it? Lots of companies give free gym memberships to their employees, and 95% don't even use it. Right. So, to what extent do you have diminishing return on your efforts? And I get it. That's $1 and every company has to do. I'm sure Katrina even sees it in her practice. She puts a lot of time and effort in some of her patients, but even at some point she has to make a decision. Okay, this patient has gone as far as this patient's going to go. No matter how much more I put into it, it is what it is, right? We would like to think everybody can get to this place where they're fully recovered, but at some point it's like, well, it is what it is, right?
That is true. In some capacity, if the person already isn't going to the gym and they already aren't eating well, then if a company comes in and, let's say, spends tens of thousands and millions of dollars, depending on the size of the company, to put in, the state of the art everything, then what's the likelihood the person that already isn't been using that in their life is going to start using that now? So, I definitely can agree with some of what Aaron is saying, because, and again, it goes down to that individual and what they're already been disciplined for. But I do have to say, I think companies, I know there's a company in Omaha, they put in a meditation room that allows, employees to go use in a quiet space during the day if they need, it's either, I call it putting myself in a timeout, where I just gotta go step away.
Absolutely, yeah.
Where I work, they encourage us to take our 15-minute breaks, like outside of the building, to leave the office. And then we are required to attend like a weekly therapy group for counselors. It's required. We have to go every week to this group. Which I can understand why, too. But I'm even shocked with the hospitals, the places where we do have first responders that, it's not even a requirement. It's a suggestion, but I think we're getting better, but I don't think we're quite there yet. But it's a hard thing to solve when people are already disciplined to their habits if they're unhealthy. But but that is it. It does, my daughter, she's a trauma nurse too. And she's kind of said the same thing, with the cookies and the coffees and all the other things. And then when it comes down to like, well, what are you doing for your mental health? It's like, well, there's not really a requirement for that. They have resources, but the employees really got to seek them out versus being like kind of mandated to do a lot of that.
The EAPs and things that have been provided. But even we were talking before we started recording about a company that I'm working with now that had a catastrophic incident at one of their locations. And I spoke with their safety person, contacted me about doing some training. And I said, well, it seems soon to be going right in and doing training. Why don't you just contact your EAP and do something for the employees and just try to, and he said, well, we want to, okay, well, I mean, I'm not a mental health person, but it just seemed quick to be getting right back into the classroom to talk about safety after we had an incident that was safety related like that. But I mean, as far as mental and physical health, this is kind of off the occupational side of things, but just basic things that people could be doing that, little things, little change that might be useful. Do you have on either side of your expertise, do you have recommendations? I mean, you mentioned meditation, counseling, certainly I've been in and out of counseling most of my life, and so what types of things?
Well, a couple of recommendations I usually recommend starting with is that the brain is more suggestible when you first wake up. So you're still kind of in a theta brainwave state. So most top performers would tell you, of the ultra successful, that they set their intentions for the day like the first thing they do. So it's kind of like deciding like, well, who I want to be today, but also like what goals, what things do I want to accomplish? And in that first like half hour when you first wake up is the best time to meditate. Just kind of sending out into the universe, your higher power, whatever that is for you, is like, this is what I want my day to be like. These are the things I need more of, because it's almost like you're putting coordinates into your brain to start looking for that throughout the day. It's kind of like that blue car theory. If you get a new car, you start seeing it everywhere on the road. If I mention blue cars, you're probably just going to drive home and start seeing every blue car everywhere. But it's the same thing, kind of setting the intention, like throwing out into like, hey, what do I want my day to be like? Because your brain is more suggestible than waiting towards the end of the day. And let's say the day has just gone to crap, and like everything's gone wrong. And that's not the best time to, there's no bad time to meditate, but it's certainly harder for the brain to then like refocus on like, okay, starting to see things better right before we're falling asleep. So morning's the best time. They've also done studies, and this is kind of where EMDR comes from. It's a trauma therapy that's pretty well versed for people that have had traumatic events, but a 30-minute walk with a friend does more for the brain than probably anything to build neural pathways faster, because it's the act of walking. So bilaterally, you're stimulating both sides of your brain because of the activity. And then you're talking with a trusted friend. And so that, as far as mental health and neuroscience, is one of the best things you can do.
That's interesting.
And that's why martial arts, working out is so good for the brain, because it bilaterally, which means you're bringing stimulation to both sides of your brain. So it's got to pass information back and forth. And when you're doing that, you physically can't have a panic attack. You cannot have an anxiety attack if the brain is being bilaterally stimulated. So those would be two recommendations that generally, if clients don't have a practice of, we start there. And then we make like that small commitment to what can we do. Maybe it's just 2 walks that week. Maybe it's the gym twice. Maybe it's cutting down on sugar. But there's small modifications.
Yeah. And so these morning routines I find really interesting. And I read a book called Tools of Titans. It was a Tim Ferriss book.
Yeah,
and he interviews all those high performers, and they all talk about their morning routines and just what you've described. Most of them are doing those things in the morning. Those meditative or planning type activities are first thing in the morning. All sorts of other morning rituals. I mean, what kind of things would you recommend?
I mean, when I wake up in the morning, I just kind of move and wonder what's broken that day.
See how everything's do a body check.
That's why you're so cranky.
Am I going to be able to put my socks on?
Do the body check, man. Absolutely. I do that too.
That explains a lot.
Yeah.
I always tell people, I was like, just move. You know,
Mhm.
one of the big things we do, we're such a sedentary population. Just move. You know, a lot of companies, will bring in people to do yoga and whatnot, or what's the stretching.
Oh, stretching, like that toolbox talk, stretch and flex.
Stretch and flex, things like
They
that.
talk about what
I think it's important to do some kind of movement every day, whether
Mhm.
it's a walk, whether it's yoga, whether it's playing basketball, just move,
Mhm.
get up out of your seat and move, stand up for even just every hour, just standing up and walking around the office, instead of sitting all hour long, stand for half of it at your computer.
Mhm.
Just standing up does wonders for the body. There's a lot of talk that sitting is the new smoking, right? That sitting, perpetual sitting is as bad for cardiovascular and heart disease as smoking is. So, that just tells you the body's meant to move, or meant to move around. So get any kind of movement. And I tell people, just play what I call active rest. Just find stuff to remember to be a kid again. If you like
Mhm.
basketball, go play basketball. Walk your
Yeah.
dog. Your dog needs to be walked anyway.
Mhm.
Walk your dog. Poor dog's sitting there anyway, wanting to go for a walk.
Right.
Just walk your dog. And then, every time people tell me, I just don't have time to get to the gym, put it on your schedule.
Mhm.
You got no problem putting a meeting on your schedule, put the gym on your schedule, and prioritize it. Don't
Yeah.
move it. It's on the schedule. Treat it like any other meeting, and just don't move it and block it off.
Yeah.
And then, just commit to it. And it's harder. And I know it's easier said than done. But, if you got kids, go play with your kids.
Mhm.
Go outside and play basketball with your kids.
Right.
Like any kind of movement. And to me, that's kind of a gateway drug, right? Movement is the gateway to getting back in the gym. It's a gateway to getting on a regimen, starting a routine, starting some kind of program. But just stand up and get out of your seat as we're all sitting here. But
I'm trying to stand up, sit up
Yeah.
straighter because I'm slouched over and thinking, oh man,
and get involved.
it is true though.
To Katrina's point, where her organization encourages them to get out of the office. You can't have a home gym. Very few people can use a home gym. Very few people have the discipline. There's too many distractions. There's too many reasons not to do it. Get out of your house and join a club, join a gym, join the most expensive gym in town. And here's why I say that, because now you got some skin in the game.
Right.
You're going to hate to not use it.
Right.
Whatever works.
Right.
Get out of your house and do stuff. Otherwise, you won't at the end of the day. And I think that's just important. Yeah, diet's important, things like that. I tell people some things, just stop eating out. You'd be surprised if you stop eating out how much junk gets out of your diet.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Plus, it's too damn expensive to eat out anyway right now.
It is really expensive. Yeah.
It's not cheap to eat in either, but that's,
we were trying to hit happy hours once in a while, and we went to one of our favorite happy hour restaurants and got there just after happy hour ended and ordered what we normally would in happy hour. When they brought me the check, I think I had one of those panic attack things. I started doing some controlled breathing and, because, you can't afford to.
Sure. And to bring this full circle, I think companies, one thing you could do instead of having cake every Friday is just twice a day, every day, just get people up and move. Everybody get up, walk around the building. I mean, just something dumb like that.
We'll just pair off and walk around and talk a little bit. Some type of
activity, and just do things to get people up and moving around and out of the office, and just break their normal routine. Because, we're habitual creatures. And once we kind of get in that tunnel vision, we talk about this in safety all the time. You just get into that tunnel vision, and comfort breeds complacency. And that's when the accident happens. Well, if you're doing things every so many hours to break that cycle and get people's heads up and the right and left brain firing again, it's like, okay, and I'm more attentive, I'm more in tune, I'm more aware again. Okay, let's get back at it. And so I think that goes a long way to not just health, but it's like, okay, now I'm more aware of what's around me. I'm awake again. I'm not just head down working this close to cutting my finger off every time.
Right. In the workplace, that's a great idea, because you do tend to get into this rhythm without doing a lot of actual thinking. You're just it's very habitual, which may or may not be good. I'm sure it's an energy conservation system, but we've been talking about habits. And so that's kind of interesting. Can we talk a little bit about habits, habit formation, habit modification, that kind of thing?
What I would say is, one of the questions you had written down is, can we train people not to have accidents? Or is it just a certain point we got to acknowledge they will have accidents? I think we're already hitting on it, right? We're creatures of habit. Our mind gets into a mode, and if companies don't figure out ways to kind of break that pattern, I think that's when accidents generally will happen.
Get out of the trance.
And
of
I'm willing to
sorts.
bet that most after action reports, you would know better than I, that when accidents happened, it people just were just kind of in that mode of working and weren't paying attention anymore. And then the accident happened.
Well, usually the response to a question, why did you do that? If you can recall,
Wasn't even thinking. Or
I don't know why I did that. I was
gonna say,
a weird.
I don't have the backgrounds that both of you have, but it's such a broad question, because it's like not only what was happening in the work environment, but also like what's happening in their personal lives, because that plays such a huge part in it, whether it's how they're sleeping or their nutrition, but what's the stress level, behind that, before they walk into the doors, because there's so many different things that probably come into play when you're investigating, especially some of the more tragic accidents.
But that stuff gets overlooked typically. That doesn't even come into consideration.
Okay.
They're all looking for issues in the work environment, something wrong with the equipment, or oftentimes we're usually just trying to blame an employee. The employee did something wrong.
That's the easy thing to point the finger at.
To be able to say you did something wrong,
or there was something wrong in the company or the culture or the policy.
Machine broke or whatever it was.
Yeah, exactly.
But Katrina's point, it's sometimes a simple question is, was that person distracted that day? And why were they distracted? Well, their wife just let them, or their husband just left them, or she caught her husband cheating on her, or something stupid.
Or
the kid's
think
really
about
sick.
addiction in families. I mean, generally, 1 in 8, there's probably one in every household. And there's so many things to that we just aren't aware of, and that usually aren't disclosed.
Right.
But I think it's easy to do like the reports and the investigations to try to find that one thing we can point it at. But I think it's probably in most cases much bigger, because
without question,
we go into mindless, anything that we've done repetitively for so long, just like driving. I mean, how many times do we get road hypnotized when we drive, and we just start driving to work, and or to home, and you just are like, wow, where was I? But I think, especially in manufacturing, when you do the same job repetitively for so long, that it kind of becomes like that. And we can mindlessly do that job, which is dangerous in a lot of these skilled labor jobs.
Yeah, you're touching on something that I have been reading about that I find really interesting. One of the common misconceptions with the C-suite people is, this is how we imagine the work to be done, but this is how the work really gets done. They have this vision of this process, and it always goes smoothly. Every day is the same. The employees are always consistent. And when you go into a plant, it's nothing like that. The work is done as an adaptation to the things you've just mentioned, the issues that we're having personally, the problems we're having in the plant, the supply chain issues, the equipment issues, whatever. But no 2 days are the same. And yet that's how it was envisioned when it was designed. And so there's a big gap, as I see it, between those two conditions. Work is imagined versus work is actually performed.
I think you can look around and see when people are, mindlessly doing something, or they're in that mode. I just kind of, we all said, I just kind of get in my zone and just go.
Well, they get their earbuds
that's
in.
my
They
point,
get their
right? When you
Led
see
Zeppelin
people working with their earbuds, or they're on the mower just going, and they've just kind of zoned out, and just and I get it. You got it. When you're doing work like that, you just kind of got to find your happy place and go. But the danger there is, are they paying attention anymore? And definitely not as much as they maybe should be or could be.
And what happens if something out of the ordinary occurs? Something non-routine takes place,
Do you even notice it? Especially if you're working with heavy machinery, sharp objects, and you're just kind of in that mode of going, and then you don't notice that somebody's came into your path, or you don't notice something happened because you were just head down working. And I get it.
The machine's making a funny noise all of a sudden.
You don't even hear it. And then, so to me, it's on the company then to kind of, again, break that cycle. It's get people's heads back up and, all right, everybody, the horn goes, everybody stop. 10 jumping, just whatever the hell it happens to be. Pull your earphones out, 10 jumping jacks, let's go. I remember we had the discussion, should you even let employees listen to music? And, it's like, well, you want them to have fun, you want them to enjoy work. But at the same time it's not so much that they not hear the truck backing up, does that automatically put them in a zoned out state of mind where they're not paying attention anymore?
Is it even possible? And this is probably something that you have some expertise in, because I'm not sure it's even possible to do a routine job like that attentively all the time.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure your brain just
No, because our brain
conserves and shuts down.
100% right, Doug. Our brain is designed to create shortcuts. I mean, because what the third job of the brain is to conserve energy, and that's not necessarily physical energy. It's just it doesn't want to have to keep rebuilding new neural pathways, so it creates shortcuts, and that's the dangerous part of it. That it is almost impossible for you not to basically slip into that like we know how to do this. We've been doing this every day for 10 years, 20 years. And I think a lot of the things that we just they kind of come full circle, especially when you're talking about bigger manufacturing facilities that run 28 days a month. And certainly Omaha, has a few of those big manufacturing companies, is that when you consider, like Aaron talked about, like kind of the inner child, the one that likes to have fun, that likes to go play, that, wants to play basketball, walk the dog, do those things. And you think about a manufacturing employee, they have some of the highest divorce rates. They have some of the, probably highest rates in addiction. They probably don't get to enjoy much hobbies or many things like that personally outside because of the demands of that job. And then you think about then doing a repetitive job over and over the same way all the time. It is kind of a recipe for, a lot of things like health issues, accidents on the job, because you're looking at such a broad, like all of these different factors internally and externally that I think play into a lot of that as far as like the well-being of the individual employee, even if like the visionaries that set up at the top and, imagine this euphoric place where everyone comes into work happy and no accidents happen and everyone feels fulfilled and satisfied and the companies are hitting all their numbers. That's really, it's a great vision from visionaries who don't have to go out and be the technicians, and they haven't experienced how it feels or the emotions that come with each one of those different.
Or they forgot.
Or they, they have. In a lot of cases, they have been detached for a while. And like if we could solve this issues for companies, boy.
I know, but I like Aaron's point, that point of intentionally just getting out of the trance for a little while, I think is a useful, because that's something we could easily do.
Well, to Katrina's point, I think when you hear people say, I do it without even thinking, I just do it without thinking about it, I think that should scare the crap out of you, because they're in that state that we're talking about. One thing that I teach in our operations class is this concept of a flexible workforce, right? This idea that people can do multiple jobs. It does a couple of things for a company.
Like cross-training type thing?
Yeah, more or less. Okay. So what it does is, one, there's no single point of failure in the company, that if Doug's not here that day, the whole place doesn't stop because he's the only one that can do it. The other thing it does is it fights fatigue and boredom within a company, because if I can get you trained up on 15 different machines, hey, Doug, you're over here today. Okay, tomorrow you're going to be over there. Tomorrow you're going to be there. So that helps fight some of that repetitive thing. It can get you out of that mode. Or, hey, this morning you're going to be over here, in the afternoon you'll be over there. So at least for a portion of the day, you're attentive and going, okay, I got to remember how to do this. Okay, yesterday I was over here, now I'm doing this thing over here. So if you have an ability to move, and this takes time and training, which means it takes money, and companies don't like to spend the money on training if they don't have to. But if you can get people moving around within the company, especially in the manufacturing and the heavy labor type things, where they're not doing the same thing every day, if you are able to move them around, it fights boredom, keeps it interesting. They're doing different things. They're using different parts of their brain. They're essentially having, especially at the beginning of the shift, they're having to relearn everything, because maybe they hadn't been on the station in 2 weeks. So now they're having to remember how to do this. And I think that ability would help, right? Just this concept of a flexible workforce, and then taking advantage of that, moving people around. It gets harder in certain areas where there's some specialties. I get it. But, if I'm on a construction site, teach this guy how to frame, teach this person how to pour concrete, teach this person, and you got to move them around. Now I know unions and things like that get in the way of those things happening, but you get the idea. Is like, just let's not pigeonhole people. Let's move them around a little bit to fight some of those mind numbing things.
Yeah, I would agree. I think a little diversity in the work activity would be nice.
It helps. I mean, who doesn't? I mean,
Mhm.
it's my Baskin Robbins theory.
Danni.
Who wants vanilla ice cream every day, right? You
Oh,
got
hell
to change it
no.
up, right?
No, I'm not. I couldn't have vanilla ice cream every day.
See?
Well, I could if it was the only ice
But
cream.
who wants
Yeah.
it, right?
But I'd eventually tire of it and eat cake. You know, that's what I'm trying to avoid.
So,
So-
like a
go
gym
ahead.
buddy, you could have a work buddy.
Yeah,
So,
you
yeah.
could.
I
Yeah.
mean, for real. I think that's valid.
Yeah.
Yeah, actually, you could. I think that would be useful. And somebody like you were mentioning, somebody you could go out and take a walk with at lunchtime or break time, just to
Sure.
kind of get that straight. Because I do think that can be a little bit over that repetitiveness can be difficult.
But I think to answer your question is no, we can't train people not to have accidents.
Mhm.
We can create scenarios to reduce the likelihood. I mean, accidents, it's not if, it's when. And how
doubt.
severe.
I totally agree.
It's in how severe. And we can create scenarios that they're less frequent and not as severe.
Mhm.
You can never. One thing I found, in training fighters, and I promise you, the same thing happens in every
Mhm.
organization you ever investigated with an accident. That we'll be in the middle of the fight. I've had this happen. I've had all the way up to the UFC level. I've had this happen. I've been in the corner. I'll look the fighter square in the eye. I'll go, listen, okay, stop doing X. You're telegraphing it. Stop doing it. Right. Do anything else but this. And what do you think is the first thing they do when that bell rings? The thing I told them to stop doing. Right.
It happens that way every time, though, because you're basically telling the brain
Right.
to do it.
So to the
You're
point is
basically telling it to look for
when
it.
we
and
do our
it.
Give you some reverse psychology
Yeah.
on this.
So well, think about it, right? When we
Right.
do all our safety training, what do we always say? Here are the things we shouldn't do.
Right.
So are we setting them up for failure a little
I
bit?
think we are.
Because that's on our don't
No
fall,
doubt.
don't fall. Oh shit! And then
Exactly. No,
I fell, right?
I totally
Or
agree.
they're so focused on not falling, they're not paying attention to the wall they're going to run into.
Right.
Mhm.
And the thing I find is
Right.
a little bit frustrating is, we tell people not to have an accident, like, be safe, go out there and just be safe, whatever the hell that means,
Right.
and then when they have an accident, when an inevitable error is going to occur, there's always going to be deviations from the expected.
Sometimes out
Then
of their
you just-
control.
Then you yell at them and say, you need to care more about this and you need to work more carefully.
Or
and
we
you
just talked about this.
yeah, exactly. and I hear that a lot. We just trained on this and they did it, which tells me that training to some degree is ineffective. It's certainly not the exclusive control that we use, right? What we need, and you probably do this in the Air Force, we find out where the most critical potentials are, the real critical hazards, and we really build a lot of capacity into those to try to prevent that.
Mhm.
Or if we do have a failure, that it's a soft failure, because telling someone not to
Oh, that's what
Get
they're
hurt.
looking for.
doesn't
It's like in
work,
driving simulations, like don't hit the wall, don't hit the wall.
right?
What happens? You just start going
like-
towards the wall and you
it's
don't
like-
understand then all of a sudden how you hit it.
Yeah.
That's,
Is that truly what we're telling the brain?
absolutely.
Hit the wall.
because language matters so much to the brain because the brain is so black and white. So we have to be really precise in even the language we use with ourselves and others. And saying like don't hit the wall or try not to hit the wall. I hope you don't hit the wall.
Or you
None
shouldn't.
of those are strategies to not
Right.
hit the wall. So
Right.
just like when you're learning to ski, or if you've ever been to ski school, they don't tell you to focus on the trees. They tell you to focus on the open path. Just always look at the open path, because once you start looking at the trees, you're going to hit
You're going
one.
right to the
You're
trees.
going to hit one.
That's a
Because
good point.
to tell a fighter don't do this, don't do this. And, I mean, it makes sense why the first thing, think about
Mhm.
your kids when you're raising them too. Like, don't do this, don't do this.
Well, Aaron would just
A lot
tell
of
me,
times
keep
we
your
just-
hands up, keep your hands
Oh,
up,
yeah.
keep your hands up. And then my hands would be down around my waist.
Yeah.
I'm
Oh no. Yeah.
like, I
Yeah. Or you can watch somebody else and be like, man, he should be keeping his hands up right now. And then boom, but
mm-hmm.
a lot harder when you're out there. But our brain is very black and white. So the language steers it.
That's really
And
interesting.
if we keep focusing with ourselves or within organizations on what's wrong,
Mhm.
generally it's going to be really hard to overcome those things that are
Mhm.
wrong.
Mhm.
Because we all know what's wrong generally. And so a lot of times, like you said, you can spend all the amount of hours, all the money's on the trainings, the things keep happening. So a lot of times it's not really the real issue then. And
Agreed. Yeah.
years ago, Aaron gave me a book, The Coaching Habit, I think, and it still sticks with me. I take a lot of book notes, and I've even passed them to clients because these questions to ask ourselves are great. And one of them is like, okay, if something repetitively just keeps happening, asking the person, like, what's the real issue? Like, it's usually not what's on the surface level. And whether that's much deeper because things are happening at home, or whether it's something, that's happening at work that just isn't being discussed because maybe it's so minute, people they're not aware of it. But a lot of times what's on the surface isn't really the issue. I think in most cases.
Right. And I would say that, our idea of the culture of working safely is what can trump it. You have to train. Don't get me wrong. You have to get information out there. You have to train, but then what? Right. We know if we're constantly harping on things, that's what's in their mind, and that's when the slip will happen. But the culture of which people now start looking out for each other, start helping each other, and filling in the gaps, so to speak. Like, I know Doug's having a bad day, so I'm going to look out for him.
Yeah.
Or I know Katrina is having issues with X, and maybe the manager doesn't know that. So maybe I'll clue in the manager, or maybe I'll just consciously walk out, or maybe I'll say, hey, why don't you take a break? I got it. Because I know you're having a shitty day. Right. And I think that's where the culture piece can come into it as well, because now, those intangibles that you can't train to can come out.
Yeah. Yeah. You can't control those kind of outlier issues like that. I think that makes a lot of sense. I've just been frustrated with this training harder piece. You just need to care more, and we won't have these accidents. I heard a company say that not too long ago. We give these employees everything they need, and they still do stupid shit. And I'm like, yeah, but that's expected. We have to just know that's going to happen and somehow address that.
Here's what I would say to that person too, is like, you gave them everything you think they need.
Good
right.
point.
And
did you actually talk to them and find out what they feel they need?
No, that is a missing piece.
You know
every
what I
time.
mean?
And I don't mean to be like, because I know I don't come from this background, but I'm like, well, no, I don't cuss on your podcast, but like,
you're
no
more than
shit,
welcome.
Like,
right.
Be safe. Well, like, everyone's brain is wired to be safe. Why is that the message, right? I mean, I know we can't say be well or be happy or be good because happiness is fleeting, but like, be safe. We already know we're to be safe. Nobody wants to go to work and get their hand cut off, or nobody wants that. So I feel like that, I think that's pretty obvious. So like, having a different language in these in cultures in companies, whether at home and we're raising our kids, whatever it is, it's adaptable, right? But like, I like the way Aaron said that too. It's just, how are you doing today? Like, you seem off. Like, how can we help you, or what do you need? Because we all know to be safe. So I don't know, but it's culturally been the thing that's always been accepted in manufacturing or organizations.
Yes, this is why I love having non-safety people on the program, because the things that have been, I have this confirmation bias, of course, because this is how I view it, and that must be right. And so when people from the outside look in and say, well, that's ridiculous. No, everybody's conditioned to be safe. They might need to learn something about this piece of equipment, and that's where the training comes in. This piece of equipment can do this, and this moves like this, and that's how you have to train them. But it's like every time my wife or one of my sons or something is driving, so I say, drive safely, and they're always like, duh, what the fuck? I mean, what do you think, I'm out there driving around with my eyes shut? I mean, I always drive safely, right?
Dad, I thought about hitting a pole today, actually.
Yeah, exactly. It's exactly the same thing. Like, be safe out there today.
Sure. Well, I guess the next question is, what could you say instead?
A lot of variables.
What could you say instead? Like, you just start saying things like, hey, let's keep our heads up. Let's keep our eyes and ears open. Hey, let's watch out for each other.
Keep an eye on.
Let's not get heads down. So I think changing the language, something different. And this is where our daily stand-ups, right? The daily stand-ups, I think, would help. We talk about these all the time, where you do the powwow before you break and then do it again at the end of the day. Instead of saying being safe, let's say, hey, let's keep our eyes and ears open. Let's keep our heads up. If you see something, come grab me. What'd you see out there today? Just, hey, let's scout for each other. We don't need to say the word safe to imply that. We already understand it. Let's say some different things like let's hustle, like,
Yeah. I like
let's
that.
hustle, let's stay vigilant.
Yeah.
Let's do some things like use different words like, oh, vigilant. What the hell does that mean? What's vigilant mean?
Look it up.
It's
Exactly.
like,
But at least
okay,
they're doing
let's do that,
something actively.
Well, and Doug, tell me
I
too,
agree.
from your experience, when you go into organizations, how much laughter do you hear?
That's an interesting question.
Yeah.
That's an odd question, but an interesting question. I'm not sure if it's ever been asked in a safety context before.
Yeah.
There are employees who are just by nature happy people that I encounter periodically, but most people they're kind of walking in that zombie-like, and even the managers are rarely, because everyone is stressed. Everyone
whole
seems to be overworked.
F my life mode.
Spread to,
Yeah, life's
this
hard.
is one I hate. I ask people, how you doing, man? Living the dream. As
Yeah,
if
you
they
get
want to
the
put a
same-
gun in their
yeah.
mouth. I'm just like, dude, I mean,
Well, I like that Katrina said that because one, it's a direct correlation of the mood of the place. But I would bet money if you asked 100 safety people, if you walked in a room, everybody's laughing, how safe are they being? Like, oh, they're not being safe.
Right,
Oh, they're all screwing around and joking
And I
around.
challenge
When
them to
that, but
probably
that's
being
not
more
true.
safe.
Yeah,
You're
yeah,
absolutely
because they're
right.
paying
Because
attention.
it breaks up hypnotic.
100%.
right.
And also just laughter.
Mood has so much to do with
Yeah,
our
like
overall.
you can't let there's a DBT skill called half smile, where if you force yourself to smile and you force yourself to set up right, you generally change the chemical makeup in your body,
Uh-huh.
right? It's hard to be upset if we're forcing a smile. But like, I just wonder what it would look like if there was comedy shows, there was things to make people laugh throughout their workday, if that would elevate performance.
That's an interesting question.
Well, I
I've
think
never
it
even
would.
considered that, but I'll bet it
100% would. And it would also make them pay
Yeah.
attention. How many safety meetings have you walked into where the guy's like, okay, now we're going to talk
Yeah.
about
Right.
the OSHA requirement. Everybody's like,
Oh yeah, I've been to thousands
where
of those.
if you
Yeah,
make them more interactive and some laughter involved, you naturally retain information better because now they're engaged and paying attention.
Yes.
So really the question is how engaged are people in the work environment?
That's yeah.
And I'd be
that's it.
willing to bet that the environments where they're disengaged, there's probably more accidents.
Mm-hmm. And there's less laughter. There's less overall just joy.
Absolutely.
It is this living the dream.
Yeah.
Like, oh,
Yeah.
I hate that. I hate that response, because gosh, if it's that bad, change it somehow. If it's possible, I guess that's easy to say, but
People
Well,
do more when they're happier.
I would
They
think.
eat
100%.
better when they're happier.
Yes.
They exercise more when they're happier. Just like everything changes
Mhm.
based off of, and I know happiness is fleeting, but like if you think of all those chemicals that go with happiness,
Mhm.
Serotonin, dopamine, that feeling, of like euphoric or falling in love,
Mhm.
it all increases performance, just like in sports. But if a person's depressed or stressed, you're talking about cortisol and different sets of chemicals
Right.
that we really don't get to choose because they're based off of our thoughts and feelings. So the brain just dumps them into match.
Yeah.
And it's a repetitive cycle. So then you put a majority of people with those chemicals into environments where we know it'll bring the happiness of others down that are generally happy.
Mhm.
It could look a lot different if we came to
No,
work and
I
we were
agree.
laughing and enjoying.
It really
where-
could.
I think to
who
be
we worked with.
more attentive, more assertive as well, more likely to call things out, more likely to
Yes.
bring to attention.
Mhm.
I mean, when you're in a humdrum, mundane environment, Doug, that dumbass will fall off the ladder.
Right.
He'll,
Well, it becomes people's personalities.
Right.
It does. Yeah, you do.
Yeah.
You regress to the mean, it
Becomes
seems
their
like.
being, essentially, is what it is.
That is a great comment. I don't know how exactly I don't know how I bring that as a consultant to a workplace other than just trying to be joyful
I think
in your
go back
demeanor.
to
but-
one of the things we harped on is how often as a safety person are you walking around the place? How often are you talking to people? How often are you
Truly
are you
talking
getting
to
on the
them.
floor? Hey, Doug, what's going on? How you doing today,
Yeah,
buddy? Heck,
yeah.
all right, I'll see you around. And then
How'd the kid doing that soccer game this weekend?
Are you doing those things to engage people and keep them attentive and let them know someone's watching them? Let them know, hey, I actually know your freaking name.
Yeah.
Things like that, and that to crack a joke, have some fun. Everybody break. We're taking a 15-minute break. Bring it in, and you do something fun together and create some laughter.
Oh, that's a great idea.
I think those things where
Yeah.
those one-on-ones, walking the floor, creating that environment. moving people around,
Yeah.
having work buddies,
It is one thing to talk to people, but it's another thing to really talk to people when
Sure.
you're actually walking around. And I know everybody's busy. You usually have a destination, but just to take a little bit of time to do that. And
But how
engage
busy
people.
are you? If we know it's going to increase productivity, make people safer and more engaged, is it time well spent?
Absolutely.
Yeah. 'Cause
It
you're
would
probably
seem
going to pay
so.
for it somewhere.
Right.
100%.
There's been
Yeah.
days we've canceled trainings depending on like if it's just been a hard week
Mhm.
there at work. And we've just watched stand-up comedy instead of the training.
Really?
Yeah, because when you're dealing, when you're in the trauma pit, all week long, or it's just been stressful, then we'll recognize like, okay, we don't need another training this week.
Mhm.
What we need is laughter and just a break for a little
Wow.
bit.
You know what's funny?
Good for you.
A
That's
correlation. Some cultures, like in the United States, when somebody passes, it's a day of mourning,
Mm-hmm.
wearing black. And in some cultures, it's a day of celebration and laughter.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right? And you ask, well, why? Well, think about it, right? If you had a hard week at work and we do something fun and we laugh, we remember all the good things that happened throughout the week rather than just dwell on all the crap that happened
Misery,
that week,
yeah.
right? So if you have somebody passes and you have a day of celebration, you tend to remember all the great things, right? And you're no longer mourning, you're celebrating. And I think it's the same concept in my mind. It's that, hey, if you interject laughter into the workplace, you interject laughter on a hard week, okay, you shift your focus.
That's a great idea, man.
And your chemicals. You
And the
switch your
chemistry.
chemical state and the
No
chemistry
doubt.
of your body.
It's all correlated.
It's really important.
I like that. So just in closing, we mentioned Tim Ferriss earlier and the tools of Titans and some of that stuff. One of the questions he asks everybody is what you're reading, which I find interesting because I read all sorts of different stuff. Are you reading anything interesting right now? Anything either of you? Or it could be fiction, nonfiction. It could be just for fun. It could be educational. Or have you read anything interesting lately?
I was an idiot, went back to school.
I know you
So
did.
my leisurely fun reading has taken a back seat, and I'm
That's true about school.
I'm knee deep in textbook and research articles right now.
Yeah, that is true.
So I have.
Are you in finals week, or have your finals were over? Or
No, I'm in summer term, so I just finished last week. I finished the spring semester. I rolled right into summer term.
Okay.
So in that respect, I'm reading a lot, but I'm reading more research and more. Nothing that it's fun, but not fun. Right?
Yes,
that's not.
Well, it's because you find it interesting.
It's not casual, leisurely reading like the books that Katrina and I used to pass books back and forth all the time. To me, that's more leisurely, fun reading where I'm learning stuff. I'm learning because it's like, oh, that's a cool topic. Let's check this out.
Yeah.
Not. I'm knee deep in the 15 research articles on
nutritional biochemistry and stuff,
and things like that. So I haven't had much fun reading in about a year. Now I will find stuff. I tend to, because I'm so tired of reading from the textbooks and stuff. I'll podcast more. I'll listen to keynote speeches more on some fun topics. But I haven't had a fun book in a while. My last book I was reading was called Not Nice. It was basically how to learn how to say no to people and stand up for yourself more.
That's so important.
And of course, her comment was, "You're already not nice, so why do you need that?"
Seems like something you had mastered.
I am a close friend. I feel like I can say that to him without
you don't need any practice
getting a right hook from him.
Yeah. Do you get to read, or is work too consuming for you?
I mean, like Aaron, my fun reading is like I love self-help books. Like so right now, and my ADHD doesn't allow me to read just one book generally at a time.
Yeah.
So I'm reading Homecoming by John Bradshaw. And then that's kind of like a healing the inner child, therapy book. And then I'm reading Success Principles, which was one Aaron got me from Jack Canfield, who was the author of Chicken Soup of the Soul.
Oh,
so these are really great.
Yeah.
Winning the Game of Business by John Asseroff. I have some bookmarks in. And then Phrases to Deal with Difficult People. This is my fourth one.
Jesus.
That I kind of have all open and like couple in my car, a couple on my nightstand, like I have them everywhere, but I
always have stacks of books partially read going, just a paragraph here, a paragraph there. But I'm reading one like, Todd Conklin, workplace fatalities, that's always an uplifting topic, so, but I just want to understand more about it when I work with companies that are dealing with these types of catastrophes. I did pick up this book called Atomic Habits. Have you heard this one?
Yeah, I think we both read it.
I have not read it yet, but I'm
Discuss
looking
that
forward
one.
to
It's a
reading
great
that.
one.
Sounds interesting. It's
Yeah.
on somebody's best
There's another one that we had passed called Mini Habits.
mini habits. Okay.
Is another good one.
Well, The Power of Habit was the first one I read, that Charles Duhigg book. It was about 5 or 6 years ago. Really outstanding.
Those are great
Those are
books.
interesting to me because so much of what we described, what you were talking about, the workplace is so habitual, and having good habits or understanding how to alter habits slightly is, I think, really critical to
I think
making those changes. But
addressing or understanding our habits is really the key to any change, whether it's a physical discipline, whether it's an addiction discipline, a work culture discipline. When you really understand how habits are formed and wired in your brain, there's just a lot of power, I feel like, when it comes with education on habits. Because even though we know it better, that doesn't mean doing better. And I hear that every day in my office. Well, I know better. I know not to use this drug. I know not to do this thing. I just don't understand why I'm not being successful. And it's because our brains aren't wired for success if the habit is self-defeating to that. So those are great books.
That's interesting.
I think it's important to remember too that your body doesn't grow without change, and meaning you have to break habit for it to grow. We know from lifting weights that if you stay in the same routine, you will stagnate and actually regress. So you have to alter your routine periodically, roughly every 6 weeks, for you continue to grow and get stronger and more physically healthy. So your body, the human body, is amazing, is that it loves to adapt, and it only grows when it adapts. And it's no different in the brain. Like you have to break habit. It sounds weird. You have to break habit to get more mental clarity, to get better mental health, to form new habits. So if you're happy with the way things are, you're actually regressing automatically, right? So, it's great to form habits, but you also have to understand you actually have to break habits to grow. In that matter, you have to get out of
Would you call that stress to some degree? I mean, you have to stress your
everything
body.
is a stressor, right? Everything is a stressor. Lifting weights is a stressor. Reading a book is a stressor. But you have to break habit. You have to break routine. You have to get out of your comfort zone, is what we hear a lot of times. Otherwise you won't grow. Like, you can't, that's not how the body works, mentally and physically.
And it's going to be uncomfortable. Like, there isn't a question. It will be uncomfortable because you're wired to that habit. So I think one of the most important things is to have a game plan for how you're going to handle the moment when it becomes uncomfortable. Because if you wait until it's like you're having the craving or you're having the urge or you want to go do the thing you're trying not to do, if you don't know how you're going to handle it in that moment, you'll always go back to the old way of it. So just knowing, like, it's just going to be me getting out of bed and putting my shoes on and then driving to the gym and then see how I feel on my way to the gym. Generally, you're past the urge of not going. Same thing with avoiding a food or avoiding, a drug. The urge has never killed us. Cravings never killed us. So really just knowing how you're going to handle it is really key, and then not giving over to it. And it's going to be uncomfortable for a little while because the brain doesn't want to do something different.
I get it.
You can get into, we talked about fasting earlier, and you can get into the biochemistry and the cellular chemistry of fasting and autophagy and all those things. But what does fasting really do? It breaks a habit pattern.
It does.
Right? It breaks a habit pattern. It throws a monkey wrench into your routine. And that in itself is incredibly valuable.
Just like laughter, we can always bring these things back together because you're breaking up a pattern. And there's a lot of different ways to do it. And that's essentially what habit breaking, the fastest ways are just to keep breaking up that pattern as fast as you can, as efficient as you can, because most of us can't go 100 days to build a new habit. That's what scientifically it takes to start a new habit. Do something every day for 100 days. Well, that doesn't work so well. So these little things are little tricks to break up the habit.
And I think safety professionals can use that to their advantage. We talk about training people into not making mistakes. Well, how many different ways are we breaking up the habit pattern of the work environment and breaking that humdrum, mundane mindset? Can we get out there and just and keep them thinking about it different, doing it a little different, and changing things so that they're constantly aware. You know, what news come? What's Doug bringing today?
Yeah.
You know, and now they're in the moment, which we know people, when you're in the moment and thinking, accidents tend to not happen.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Interesting. Well, Cam showed up again, which means I think he's back there, which means our hour is up. We're way over hour.
It's all
Oh, geez,
good.
it goes
Which
so
is
fast.
always the
really,
case.
guys.
Yeah.
Oh, goodness.
This is Katrina Bishop, Aaron Cerrone. Do you have a business or hypnotherapy?
Yeah,
Are you taking patients?
I do. It's a betteryou.me. Is where they
betteryou.me.
can find my website. Yep.
Okay.
You can send me a contact.
I
if
can
you want
remember the
more.
last time you were here, I had said the next time my boys are in town, they both need to come and see you. Just for disciplinary, just not disciplinary. That sounds wrong. For
Yeah.
discipline formation, overcoming those fears and, those kind of things. I think they would both benefit tremendously from that. They could both benefit tremendously from you as well. Mid-America Martial Arts. Can you take any more members at your place?
I
Or
can
are you
always
full?
take more members. You can
You got
always.
space for
I got
my
a
space
big
is
building.
open.
I know. I was going to
I
say.
haven't been there in 4
somebody
months.
can take my spot. I haven't been there. So we're talking about
yes.
habits.
So tell me again the website.
I bet.
A better you.
A betteryou.me. Mid-America Martial Arts. I love these conversations. I get tired of talking about safety, frankly.
Yeah.
It's nice to correlate things outside of that immediate realm with the safety perspective.
I tell my students at UNO all the time, especially my entrepreneur students, I was like, just because you're in one industry doesn't mean you can't learn from other industries. Like we always think,
question.
market research. Let's what are my competitors doing? Like if I'm a construction company, I can gain value by watching what a flower shop does. Like they might be doing some valuable things.
Yeah.
So I think safety, you need to get out of your wheelhouse and see what other people are doing and how they're doing things, because you can apply best practices from everything.
I totally agree. In fact, I think some of the most insightful things I've learned and heard on this podcast have come from people that are not directly involved in safety, because their perspectives are not clouded by that.
Yeah.
The same old training that we've all had. We've all been through the same training, and we're all trying to do things the same way. And it's obviously not working to the extent that we need it to. So I appreciate that.
Yeah,
Thank you both. It is Friday afternoon, so I don't know what everybody has going on, but I hope you have a great weekend. Keep working hard at this. I know that there are a lot of challenges to what we do in the safety profession. Some of these things are really frustrating, but keep exploring. Break things up a little bit, try some new things, get out of your comfort zone, get your people out of their comfort zone a little bit.
Laugh a little.
And laugh a little bit. Yeah, ideally. Yeah, that sounds great. Thanks, everybody. Cam, thanks, man. Have a great weekend, and we will talk to you next week. Later.